The Kremlin's list of officials attending Ukraine peace talks in Turkey revealed that Putin thought it was better not to sit down with his Ukrainian counterpart Zelensky for the negotiations. We discussed this more with Professor Robert Lawrence. Welcome, Professor Lawrence.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So, Professor Lawrence, why do you think Putin decided to skip the ceasefire talks this time?
I think there are a few issues as to why he decided not to come. First of all, it's probably a bit too early in the process for Russian standard operating procedure. Like in Soviet times, the Russians tend to scrupulously plan out high-level talks, with advanced teams laying down the groundwork before high-level talks actually take place. Secondly, Zelensky laying down this challenge to Putin to show up, or else it would indicate that he wasn't serious about peace talks. But I don't think Putin is very susceptible to that type of persuasion. I don't think Putin sees Zelensky as his equal to begin with. But either way, he isn't going to be coerced into doing something he doesn't want to do, especially by someone against whom he believes he has the upper hand. And lastly, I think given Putin's general outlook on hegemony and multipolarity, given the news coming out of the Gulf, I don't think that he wanted to give Donald Trump another stage on which he could signal that he's the central deal maker in global politics.
Well, to be honest, it wasn't much of a surprise that Putin didn't, decide not to show up. But no Putin also means no Trump, right?
Right. You got to remember, this is the first time that the Russians and Ukrainians have met since 2022, since early in 2022, and Putin and Zelensky haven't met since 2019.
Right.
So, the idea that there would be a multilateral meeting with up to 4 heads of states, including Türkiye's Erdogan, that's a pretty ambitious goal for less than a week's notice, I think. So, I think Trump's decision not to go was mostly a response to the Kremlin's announcement that Putin wasn't going. But the U.S. is sending Marco Rubio, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg. So Washington is taking the negotiations seriously, and they're going to have a significant presence, whether it be direct or indirectly.
Well, regardless of attendance by Putin or Trump, Putin did propose the first ceasefire talks with Ukraine. Does that mean Putin is at least interested in ending the war? What do you think?
Well, he's a notoriously difficult person to read, so it's tough to say definitively. But, he countered this 30-day ceasefire proposal with a proposal of his own to resume talks with Kiev with no preconditions. He says he's serious about negotiations and he wants a long-lasting peace, but he also talked about eliminating root causes of the conflict about which the two sides fundamentally disagree. So this kind of maximalist messaging is very similar to what it was in 2022, which leads one to presume that he might be buying time rather than trying to negotiate an actual end to the war right now. On the other hand, it could be a negotiation strategy for him to maximize gains while he believes he has the upper hand at the table.
Right, but it is a progress that the two sides are taking time to sit down to talk about it. But what do you think will be the main agenda during the first round of negotiations? Will it be territory, security guarantees?
Yeah, okay, so according to the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov, the agenda is going to be about root causes, a sustainable settlement, ground realities, and territorial concerns. These are to conclude, according to him, denazification of the Ukrainian government. And this is a premise that the Kiev government wholeheartedly does not accept. They reject this from day one, okay? Another topic is going to be ensuring recognition of what Moscow considers the new realities on the ground, meaning that the Russian ownership of the eastern Ukrainian provinces or regions is a fait accompli. It's a done deal. So this is also not likely going to sit well in Kiev. These territorial issues, that's what Ukraine wants to talk about the most, and basically the Russian side is maintaining that it's off the table. So these are pretty big hurdles, and it begs one to question what Putin meant when he said that there are no preconditions. So this view of the substructure of these negotiations is so different from the two sides that I think it's going to be a challenge just to get the ball rolling.
Well, according to you, it'll be a challenge to draw an end to the war this time. But how much progress out of the talks do you think will be considered, fruitful or at least successful out of the first round of negotiations?
Yeah, well, Moscow's sending a relatively low-level delegation, and the signaling thus far coming from the Kremlin and the Russian press is pretty pessimistic. The deputy foreign minister said that his side is seeing incompetence in their counterparts and they doubt their capacity for negotiations. So, that kind of messaging leading up to the negotiations, it doesn't exactly exude a lot of confidence in the efficacy of this meeting, So, I think people should temper their expectations of these negotiations. The two sides haven't met since 2022, so just
Right.
getting, like you said, getting back to the table is a significant step.
Right.
As far as success goes, it could be measured in simply the completion of talks, but also, maybe with the intention of having another talk in a timely manner, maybe bringing higher level officials from Russia this time, and if things go exceptionally well, some sort of a ceasefire. But we also have to make sure that that both parties adhere to the ceasefire if that comes about.
All right, Professor Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a good one.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.